Coils, the philosophy podcast where we have no idea what we're talking about. No, I'm kidding. Brought to you by unqualified professionals with a little bit of experience in what we know what we're talking about and sometimes can't put it into a sentence. Anyways, today's topic is there value in obsolescence? And if so, what is that value? I'm joined today by some lovely co-hosts, Trevor and Stefan. Stefan's a little under the weather here, recovering a voice, so I'm going to give him some free points, probably just seed our arguments immediately, and any that we may have. No, but so the reason I wanted to talk about this was like I mentioned, I think either in the Discord or in our group chat, that I've been trying to think of something that I could like string together a bunch of ideas about, akin to the McDonald's episode that we had way back. It was like the fourth episode maybe that we ever did, was a topic on aesthetics that was particularly, like this one thing that I had a lot to say about. And so I was like, well, let me see if there's anything like that.
Peak.
And so yeah, it was
it was peak. Peak for Mortal Coils.
Exactly. And so, I'm sitting here amidst way too many books. I look over here and I've got like a bunch of vinyl records. I've got more over there. I've got cassette tapes in this drawer. There's an old stereo here. Like, I'm surrounded by a lot of what some people would consider obsolete technology, and I've got even more of it upstairs. I don't know. There's just something about it to me. I also happen to be somebody who religiously checks the mail almost every day, despite the fact that I am not expecting anything. I just go to see if the and bring the mail. I mean, I'm sure most people do that, but what I mean is, like, I don't know, I just kind of have a thing about snail mail that's really nice, and I think some people out there would agree. So what I wanted to do is explore the idea, like, is there value in the obsolescence of things, and if so, what is it? And maybe we can explore that with these different versions of technology and other little facets here and there. And I think that's one of the easiest ways to examine it is through technology, because technology changes really quickly and sort of definitively sometimes, to where things do become really obsolete. So any opening remarks? Do you have a favorite piece of obsoleteness?
Well,
Do you have
the problem with this topic in particular is there's not a whole lot for me to grapple onto like immediately. Like you really do like
see really... that I thought I was about to get hit with another. Trevor's like, it's just a really bad question.
Well, there's well, the thing is, like, there's just so much you could discuss here. It's hard to actually discuss anything. I can kind of, and I do think that the listener is getting at this too. You can kind of get a nuance of like, oh, cassette tapes and CDs and VCRs and film and paintings and all sorts of things, which you can do better right now with this thing, with this like semi holographic digital image sent directly into your forehead. Whatever makes most sense to whoever's listening to this in 2030. That's a joke. No one's listening to this in 2030.
Right.
But like the difference, or what is interesting still about vinyls? Why do they still have value? Why do they especially have value in relationship to this thing that is brand new and nice and crisp? So that's kind of the way I encounter this question. The issue is, though, that kind of means a lot of things, and there's a lot on the table, that there's a lot of scaffolding underneath the question that is kind of immediately assumed, such as like, well, what makes something obsolete? There's quite a bit here, so I'll probably just leave it at that, and I'm interested to see how you encounter it.
Steph, you got anything? Or if I need to like text to speech. All right, so Stefan says the only thing that seems to increase in value through time is artful, or Is this why some old technology is now worth a lot? That's a good question.
I can't help but wonder if like ancient things, like things that get really, really old, become artful over time. Like for example, like imagine a mundane object that like a Roman citizen would have just in Rome, and
Mm-hmm.
then like 2,000 years later, it's found buried under the rubble of Pompeii, let's say. All of a sudden, it becomes artful in a sense. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
an artful object. It goes into like art. It goes into a museum and it stays there and it's observed and relished by the people that see it. It's strange, but time sometimes creates artfulness, like an artful aura to what is otherwise seen as art, uh, just random objects. Sure, they're
Mm-hmm.
obsolete. Uh, I don't know, like Roman concrete is obsolete, but there's also something artful about those Roman roads, I suppose, or at least some
Right.
sort of like the appreciation I give to like an old ancient object or I'm trying to think of a good example. Like what would be
I
something that
think
you
I
would
have a good
find?
example.
Oh shoot, please.
You ready? The ship of Theseus.
That's all right. Well, that's not Roman, but I see where you're going. That's an
Well, you
old
get what
thing.
I'm saying, though, don't you?
Uh,
Well, let me look. I'll walk through really quick with the audience. All those people who are listening in 2030. So the ship of Theseus. Break it down. Theseus has a ship. He goes out and does Theseus things. Comes back periodically and replaces individual parts of the ship over time. Now, if we assumed that while this was happening, say over the course of a year, that the old pieces that were taken off of the ship were then brought to a museum one day and then reassembled to where you could now go into this museum and see a ship that looks exactly like Theseus's ship, made up of all the old pieces of his ship, but somewhere out on the sea, Theseus is sailing on his ship. And the idea is like, well, which one of these is actually Theseus's ship? Are they both his ship? Is the one in the museum more meaningful because it participated in, maybe certain events on the seas or went to certain places or, do you get what I'm saying? Like, is it about like what you've done? Like any classical tale like King Arthur or something like that, or any or something contemporary like for us, like uh, uh even oh, here's a really good contemporary example. Okay, like I want to say there's some material out there where in the new Star Wars sequel movies, Stefan, I know you're gonna appreciate this. Uh, there's like a depiction somewhere of either like the Millennium Falcon or the lightsaber. And instead of saying Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber, it says like Rey's lightsaber or Rey's ship or something like that. And people are like pissed off because they're like, no, that's Han Solo's ship. And that's Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. And it's like, well, it belongs to this person now. So is it not theirs? And the reason that people do that is because it's a question of identity, sure, but it's also why do you assign that identity? Not purely because of possession, but because there's meaning associated with that possession.
I can't help it kind of connected to the individual in a sense. Like Bray, like that speaks to your identity specifically. Like
Mm-hmm.
you weren't raised in 2014, or were you, sorry, better example, you weren't raised in 2018 or 2019 at like a middling 9-year-old going to see Star Wars movies. I forget when
Mm-hmm.
the sequels came out, in the ether of my memory.
2015 was the first one, so you
15.
pretty
All right,
much
there you
got
are.
it. Yeah.
So you weren't 9 years old in 2015. I'm fairly certain. So this speaks to your personal identity. You scaffold and create a lot of your own being at that age, and who you are as a person is somewhat defined by some of the things that happen at that time period when you're 9 years old watching part four for the millionth time. Like your actual uh, like frozen memory of when that happened is lost to time, like the first time you watched that movie, but you saw it so many times it's like burned into your psyche, like all these things.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at like a picture and like the pictures of the Millennium Falcon and then below it there's a little label that says Ray's ship, you might get offended. You might go, no, that's no. You could do that. I would say, and I think this wraps into the main point that I would make in relationship to this entire topic, is all of this is based on your identity. It has to do with the sort of, and this is like the crux of what I would say about all of this, the sort of mereological nihilism. So for the listener who may not know what that is, it's this idea that there isn't actually value to things outside of the perceiver bestowing value to things. Now, when I say perceiver bestowing value, as an example, I would say Bray bestows value to Han Solo's Millennium Falcon. Like, it has value in this context. This is what makes it valuable. This character who I relish, all of this, it's valuable for these reasons. And then you could look at it and then draw from it what you will. Someone that was born in the 1920s may see this, let's say, like a toy model of the Millennium Falcon and go, well, that's cool and all, but I have no interest in space. I have no interest in any of these things. I just don't care. And like, it's like, this is a child's toy. And all this, and like they have no bond, no connection to it.
Mm-hmm.
So you see it, and then you apply value to it. Now, this isn't something I'm going to say that you're conceiving of and doing of your own volition, not 100%. I think there's a lot that's underneath, like your ego, what you call Bray. There's a lot underneath you, a lot of your psyche that you're not in direct control of all the time.
Sure.
That can bestow like meaning and value to the world and to the universe. And I think that somewhere along those fuzzy barriers of what you do and don't control, there is you bestowing value to Han Solo's Millennium Falcon. And that's what I mean by all of this. And obsolescence and all that. For all these things to be obsolete, Han Solo's Millennium Falcon, vinyls, cassette tapes, things that you may have relished when you were a kid, like VHS tapes that show like Dr. Seuss's snitches or sneeches or snooches. I forgot what they were called. But I used to watch that when I was 5, and I relished it. And like, if you were to pop in like that VHS tape into an old TV and like feel the static on the screen and like wipe it, you know, like feel the static, and then go over and poke your brother right in the side of the face, and then like, you know, wake him up and he screams on top of his lungs, and it's really funny. That's a level of his nostalgia that I haven't that I directly attuned to. It's something that I remember. It's part of who I am. So when we speak of obsolescence, we can kind of connect to the, like, as a conduit, this like axis between two different modes, two different points. This ideal of progression and advancement and getting towards the underlying objective, like the thing that you want right now. What do you want? Well, you want a photograph of something, like a really nice photograph. Or sorry, no, here's a much better analogy. You want a really good song, a really good copy of a song. So you want to get like an MP3 of it. But at the same time, on the opposite side of the axis, you have your own personal identity, your own mode of existence as Bray. And you're like, well, I attune to and I connect to this notion of vinyls. This is what I am. And this is in relationship to what my objective is at this moment. Like what the thing that I want to attain, which is this more abstract thing. It's this weird axis between who you are and what it is that you want. And sometimes it's more of a matter of choosing what you are over what the cold, emotionless answer to the thing that you want. Like, I want a perfect song copy. You know, I just want a song. So that's on the opposite.
It's a very
that's
particular
like the cold
choice of cold and soulless.
Well, you see where I'm going, because it's because there's an emotionality to it on the former end. It says something about who you are. Like there's a conceivable difference between your experience of like Blade Runner on a VHS tape and like watching Blade Runner
Correct.
Exactly, on Hulu on your laptop. Like there's something interesting happening there, and I think that speaks towards the art and emotionality of it, which connects to who you are, your own identity. So it's this strange thing between like logos and pathos, I think, that we're kind of getting into right now, between your emotions and love and hate and nostalgia with in bold, in all caps. Like that's the former, and then the latter is this logos, this exacting answer to your question. I want a video, and then this is the video. Everything else is relative to your objective is not as good as this video. It's not gonna. Their VHS tapes aren't as good as streaming from Hulu. Like they just it doesn't provide you the exact implementation of what it is you're looking for.
Or say it's not as efficient at providing that part of the goal.
Yeah. I mean, this is where it gets really complex, where we can talk about the implementation of a particular goal.
Right.
At the same time, you're like, for Blade Runner, I want kind of a staticky, fuzzy image. You know, that's kind of part of the aesthetic maybe I'm looking for in in this experience. But that's where it gets complex. But I do think I'm still like there is still something here talking about this axis between your own identity, where you see art and emotion, and like the cold answer to what it is that you're searching, where you can get to this notion of this very complex state of the art thing we have now that isn't attuned to your own identity because you're quite old and
Right.
not with the times. Because and that goes to the mereological nihilism bit. To some other perceiver, some 8-year-old iPad kid right now, that's Ray's ship.
Right.
As infuriating as that might be to you, I mean that's that kid's
Disgusting.
life, and that's the way that perceiver gets at reality. It's different for all of us. It's just something that speaks to you.
So check this out. So Stefan sent some messages. So he said earlier, he said, it seems we used to make technology that would eventually create more advanced technology, like a sort of progression of like building up. And now, but he's juxtaposing this. Now it seems mainly in the realm of software, we hasten the way that they are replaced. And he said he's always felt that this is a bad idea. And so I'm trying to think of like some particular examples, like oh gosh, what is something particularly? I'll do an honorary rest in peace for Adobe Flash Player. There's some good nostalgia associated with that, and I think that's a very central part of the discussion is the kind of the phenomenon of nostalgia. That's pretty much unavoidable when talking about value and obsolescence. I mean, there's a reason that people hang on to things that are old, or there's a part of the reason that people may say, well, that's Han Solo's ship, not Rey's, because when I was there in 1977, went 12 times in the opening week, and every fucking time somebody came out of space flying that ship, it was Han Solo. Don't know who this Rey chick is, but but also just like even like for the mail, like I mean that's something that I did when I was a kid. I'd go with my great grandfather to get the mail, or we would get tons of letters, or I would sit at the breakfast table and look at the Sunday cartoons and stuff like that. And so it's like if tomorrow all of that stuff was just gone, even if I don't do that as much anymore or whatever, it would still feel like a little small prick. And it's like something that meant something to me, maybe not in the most upfront way. It feels like a piece of me is gone, maybe, because there's part of that identity. It's not just what other people from the outside perceive as identity, but what I see as well. And then he also said, Steph said, I am defined by my love of movies. And I think I would absolutely feel the same way. And movies are an entertainment form that will not be with us forever, but entertainment itself will be with us forever. And he's saying, is this my ship of Theseus? I can see what you're saying like that. So like basically the idea is that the entertainment as a thing evolves over time, just like we went from like theater to photography and videography and film and these different formats, and now all of those things are even more accessible, particularly the like digital ones, not like live performance. But is this just sort of how these things will change over time? Is it and I don't think it's odd in that avenue to say or do something like I do. Instead of saying, "Hey, I can go watch Blade Runner right now." I could watch Blade Runner on my second monitor while we're doing this podcast right now if I wanted to, and it probably wouldn't take me but 30 seconds. But there's something different about, for example, when I go look for movies, if I'm doing one of my little like thrifting things, if I find a movie that I know would have been released primarily viewed in a certain way, like on tape. Like if I went out and got a copy, like I have a copy of Blade Runner on VHS. I do not own a copy of Blade Runner on DVD or Blu-ray or any other particular version that might have been released, even if they have it in 4K with all the different versions that were released. Like I don't want that one. I want the one that is like the OG, like that's it. like I went to Chicago a couple of years ago with a friend of mine, and I like bought a pricier ticket to go to an old movie theater and see what's it called, The Exorcist, on the original, like one of the original reels that hadn't been played anywhere in 50 years. And so is authenticity part of this mixed bag of feelings about um participating with things with obsolescence? It's like, I didn't need to. We could have sat in the apartment and watched The Exorcist on whatever streaming service it's inevitably jumping around to, or gone to the store and even bought a new, whatever the new DVD type is. I guess 4K is the fanciest one as of late. But there's something extra about walking into this old movie theater with the carpets and the dim lights, and somebody's playing on the organ whenever you walk in, and you sit down and the screen's got all the little, like, like film grain and things like that, and it feels like you transported yourself somewhere different than the realm of Trevor, like you're talking about, just satisfying the actual, like, core desire, like, I want to watch The Exorcist. It's like, well, now I'm doing something else, maybe.
Actually, I think you're doing the same. I think you're doing the same thing,
Right.
but I think there's more layers to it, and I think that's what the difference is. I think part of this is just appreciating. The best word might be nuance. So when we say something like, "I want to go watch and experience The Exorcist," like that's what I want to do. That's the goal that I've set for myself, and I want to experience it. And I want to, like, let me put emphasis on it. I want to experience it. I want to have this, relish this mode. And by relish this mode, I mean it in a sense that's very similar to taking psychedelics. Like, I want to relish this state of existence, or experiencing any sort of event that you consider to be momentous and enjoyable. I want to experience this state of reality, the state of consciousness. I want to open this looking door and walk inside of it. This little separate state of reality that's separate from what I usually exist in. I want to relish this. So that's what you do usually when you watch movies, as a strict example, just sticking to cinema. So when you have this notion of, this is what I want to do, I want to experience this state of consciousness called The Exorcist, then you can look at it and appreciate, if you understand, if you're getting at, like, what the central point of The Exorcist is, because that really is a great example here. You can go, well, okay, if I'm being logical here about this state of consciousness, if I'm trying to approach the state of consciousness and try to reach and breach into it, then to be completely honest, watching it from my, like, telephone probably isn't the best way to go about doing that. Like,
right. Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, as God intended.
Yeah, I was thinking that David Lynch quote, like, watching movies on your telephone, get real, So you can look at it and go, well, streaming it from my phone is technically, like, that's the most advanced and that sort of abstract notion. I want to relativize everything right now. That's what I'm trying to do. I want to tell you that your notion of things being really complex and all that, and like scientific marvels and advancing and all that, that's its own, like, state of consciousness. That's just one other state of consciousness. Some other way of encountering reality, like this way of thinking. It's just another state of consciousness. This notion of going towards more and more and more advanced things. It's just another state of being. But that's not the mode that we're trying to get to right now. We're trying to get to The Exorcist, like the proper, like getting into The Exorcist. So with that thought in mind, like, why are we so interested in this notion of obsolescence, or this notion of things becoming more advanced? Because that's just part of obsolescence. Is just the subsection of thinking of reality in those terms of reaching towards an advanced state. So why think in those terms at all? Like, that's a mode of existence that we're not interested in right now. We're interested in The Exorcist. And with that in mind, why would I watch it on my telephone? Why would I watch it, like lay out in front of you all the different options, and then go, I want this. I want to have this state of consciousness. That's what I want. Very quickly, very immediately, you'll go, oh, well, I'll go to see it in the cinema, because that's the way it was intended. That's the way the director wanted it. That's the way that this movie is supposed to be hit. Like, oh, I'm going to watch it in the cinema, and then what are the best cinemas. You could see all the different options like you did. And you found that there was this old one reeling this one that hadn't been seen in 50 years. You're like, that is great. I don't think there is a better way to experience The Exorcist. Like, I'm really like on the pulse of how to experience The Exorcist here.
Right.
This is going to be really fun. Why are we at that point, why are we thinking about obsolescence? It's not obsolete. It's exactly what you want.
Mm-hmm.
It is exactly what you want.
Oh,
now, if you want to compare,
good.
if you want to compare people to one another and like start talking about like this, that, or the other thing, just experiencing quote a movie, then we can talk about like identity. We can go like, well, this guy that was like a kid in the 60s may think that watching movies on your telephone is ridiculous and stupid. We could start talking about like identity and like who you are as a person, and that helps you select things. But if you like launch out and go, I want to experience the mode of Exorcist, I want to experience that mode of reality. Well, that to me is actually quite objective, or at the very least, I can get at that and go, well, that's not, if you want to get at it, and if you do think that the director is actually in an attainable, or at the very least something could move towards state of consciousness, like that's something I can understand, at least from the periphery, and try to move towards it in some sense, or at least like there's a way to get further away or closer to it. If you think that that's possible, then this is actually quite straightforward. This is almost mathematical. Like we can just sort of go, oh, okay, well, probably not on my telephone. Probably not reading the script, just sitting there reading it.
That's definitely an avenue, is, like, well, can I do something the way the director intended? How can I, objectively move myself into understanding like the director's vision and stuff like that? But you were saying some stuff earlier, and Steph's also sent some more good stuff that's going to spark some good conversation. But I want to mention that a big part of this conversation too, taking the stepping stone of immersion through a lot of what you said, Trevor. We want to feel certain times we want to feel immersed when we're doing things. Like I want to have an authentic experience, and so part of the way that I can do that is feeling immersed. It's part of one of the books that I was reading a couple months ago, or however long. It was the Search for Authenticity book, a little small thing talking about different, avenues of authenticity throughout everyday life. But like there's something to be said about process, I think, and where this comes into play. And we were just talking about this, is AI art. I think one of the foremost things that people think about when we compare AI art to human beings making art is the process. To us, or to the common person, whenever you push a button on your computer and an AI takes your prompt and generates a piece of art, we don't see much of a process, or if we do, it's not a human process. But when you think about like Michelangelo's David, or Pieta, or any number of great works of art, and you think about like how long it took, and all the different the process, the mistakes that went into it, and the years of learning that had to happen. And so you can go up and read a plaque of the history of the person who made it and how they got to the point and the inspiration for making it. And it's like it would be very difficult to find a comparable thing for a computer. While I'm sure something out there exists, we care a lot about the process of how art is made. And so I think when it comes to something like, and I'll take vinyl records, for example, since we haven't really touched on those yet, I've read a lot of people who are like, there's a conversation about, does it sound better? But for me, vinyl records are like a ritual, like picking one up off of the shelf from the many different colors, that it makes of all the different album arts. Looking at it, looking at the back, you can physically interact with it. You take it out, it's all a physical process. You've got to lift the needle, put it on there, it spins the whole time, and then there's this whole elaborate setup. It's a process, right? And I think over time, kind of like how Steph was saying, we've sped up the process in a way. We've made it more efficient to get, like what you were saying, that what you want, which is, I want to listen to Michael Jackson's Thriller. I want to listen to the song Thriller. well, I can take however long it's going to take me to take this record out, turn on my stereo, turn on my turntable, take this out, take it out of the sleeve, put it on there, lift the needle, do this, put it to the right song, and then turn on the subwoofer so I can hear the bass and all this stuff. I can do all that, or I can take 10 seconds, go to Spotify right now, boom, Thriller. I don't even have to pick up my phone. I can just say, hey, Siri, play Michael Jackson's Thriller. Just making sure it wasn't about to do that. But, but I lose the process when I do that. And I think we put an awful lot of meaning into process. Otherwise, we lose out on a lot of, just like I was saying, a lot of what people are upset about, probably, when it comes to the AI art situation. Or like in the book about authenticity, one of the things that the author talked about was art reproductions. We have lots of different Monet's paintings. The water lilies are among the most popular. If I had a machine that could perfectly recreate Monet's water lilies, it's still not it's not Han Solo's ship. it's my water lilies, but it will never be the original one. And and we have, as somebody, I've been to Monet's house in Giverny, and I've walked around the garden and the little pond where the water lilies are based off of, and like, I don't. That's a process. It's part of the process, and it's part of the meaning that I ascribe every time I go to a museum and I see something about Monet. I think about that experience that I had. I think about going to the house, walking around, and seeing the little artist studio and everything, and I can encapsulate this entire what you call it, Trevor, like mode of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I feel immersed, and I can call upon that every time I encounter one of these pieces of art. But
sure.
There's something missing, and I think process is a big part of it.
I think. Okay, so when we approach this, I think we get right back to where we started with the whole thing about mereological nihilism. So I would say, if we want to properly encounter this whole AI art debacle, I think we can get into it without worrying about AI art for now. So let's think about something else, and then through this something else, we'll be able to kind of encounter AI art in a better way. So there are out there, before all this AI art business, there was a subset of art, a subset of the art industry that was interested. There were people in the art industry interested in counterfeiting, making really good counterfeits. There were a couple people out there, particular painters, that were specialists with counterfeiting artists. Like there's this one guy who was like absolutely like the best, like just S tier at faking Monets, let's say. There are actually people that do this, and I wish I could remember the example, but they would literally find canvases that were made in that time period, but no one ever painted on them, and they would use paints, and they would use paints from that time period that had like collected over time, and they would use masterful technique and then create copies of Monet's. Like they would create his own Monet, like his own unique style. Not unique style. Style is Monet. Yeah, that's the style. But he would replicate, but create a new piece of art just within the mode of consciousness, I suppose you could say, of Monet. Now, these pieces of art would like sit in exhibits in museums, and would be priceless works of art in the middle of a hall full of Monets, and then this would be this counterfeit sitting right there. And as soon as somebody would go in and look at this piece of art, like a real art connoisseur, someone who spends, let's say before the internet, just spends months like going through page after page after page of books on Monets, and then goes, aha, reason, this one's a counterfeit. In a single day, that piece of art will go from priceless to worthless quite immediately. Although there's some funny exceptions to that, but we could talk about that later.
This quite literally did happen.
This happens all the time. This has happened many times, and there are certainly
it was in
still
the book,
counterfeits.
like that. This happened, like that. There was a guy. He was like the best guy at this, and he created a replica, and then they eventually found out. I think it was maybe after it had already sold for a bunch of something, and basically he was like, "You may think it's worthless, but like, was not the process of doing it just as incredible as the original?" Like if you could counterfeit a sculpture or a painting of absolute brilliance. It's like,
I'm
but
not
you
gonna
still,
right. Mhm.
yeah.
I'm not gonna say that like the process is irrelevant. I'm not gonna say like this is my counter to what you say about process. I'm not gonna say that the process is irrelevant, but I would say that I think the mode of consciousness is more relevant here. When I look at a Monet, I picture I picture Monet, like I picture this artist, and I picture what state of mind must he have had when he
Mm-hmm.
created this? What who he is as a person, like this person. Like I don't know a lot about Monet personally, but maybe like I look at this art and I go, well, everyone likes Monet. Like that's all it takes at the start. Everyone likes Monet. I've heard that name before. This is like one of his pieces of art. I'm in this museum. My brother drugged me here. What's going on? I hate art, but I still look at art. Let's say, and I don't hate art. I'm just being funny. So I look at this piece of art, and like all I need is that bond to that name Monet and the knowledge that this person's famous, and I can kind of begin to enter into the state of consciousness with this piece of art. And I can go and that thing that is beyond definition. The whole point of it is beyond definition. That tells me that this is a masterpiece and this is an impactful thing. We can't. I won't be able to define what makes a masterpiece. I just won't be able to. But I can talk about like state of a little bit about the mode of consciousness of encountering a masterpiece and what it means to this masterpiece, like to me, and the what lies underneath it, and the meaning and the intentionality, and like the myriad just trees of possibilities that underlie this piece of art. But as soon as you tell me this is a counterfeit made by some goblin, that mode of consciousness no longer exists. I no longer have that state of mind. Now this piece, the meaning, the mode of consciousness of this counterfeit is some conniving goblin has like thrown the wool over my eyes and made me have this semi-religious experience for nothing. What's going on? What a goblin. Who did this?
Right. And then the guy is sitting there and he's going,
yes.
but in the moment, you felt it was authentic.
Well, I mean, I think this speaks to all of this. All of this is like something purely nihilistic. Like that is to say that it's not there without you.
You
and
think
like,
that's a real steak you're eating?
I do mean I do mean to say like all of this kind of falls apart without you, and like you are doing something here. You're pushing the cart, and I think that's part of like this thing. So the meaning, I think, and the purpose behind all of this is that mode of consciousness and what lies underneath this piece of art. And at least for Bray, at least for you, in the year of our Lord 2025, when you look at a piece of AI generated art, you do not feel a mode of consciousness that you find value in. I'm not going to tell you that this thing is valueless,
right?
Or perhaps like you have a certain attachment to the process and the way that someone attains something, and I'm very sympathetic to that point of view. But I do think that that's just one word beyond many words to just get at the same mode of consciousness, this particular mode of consciousness that you're trying to attain here, and you appreciate the process as the way that you encounter this mode of consciousness as you approach this film or this video game or this video or this painting. I think really what you're trying to do is attain a particular state of mind, and I think that's part of that for you is process, but that's not necessarily true. Not necessarily true for everybody. I could probably make up an example where AI art that's generated today, I could generate a picture of a frog doing a kickflip over a watermelon directly above an enchilada into
I'd
the
buy
sea.
that T-shirt.
I could do that for you. I could generate that image and I can give it to you, and you can go, well, all right, you took 10 seconds to do that. Like, there's no value to this. There's no process. But I could show you that there is somebody out there in the year 2500, because time is quite useful for the sake of this example. You could look backwards and see this image and go, and like this actually says something really interesting about it. Does no, it really does. Like this particular image, it says quite a lot.
Dude, the parallels right here between this and like the idea of like cave paintings just being somebody's shit post. Like, like somebody finds 500 years from now a frog doing a kickflip over you know, enchilada or whatever, and they're like, what did this mean?
Right.
Like, clearly this was incredibly valuable, and it's like all these fucking like cows and buffalo and shit in
Well,
the
not
caves are just somebody's shit.
sure. And not necessarily. So, this is kind of funny, but to the person in 2500, it doesn't necessarily need to have been valuable at that time period for it to be valuable to them. Because, well, the thing is, it is myriad. Like but the possibilities here for something to have value is
Mm-hmm.
quite like endless. Part of it could be the value that the people at the time assigned to it, and that's why I give it value. Part of it could be necessarily like it really gets at this state of mind, this mode of consciousness of the year 2025, like right before the AI, the AGI boom, like the synthesis of all of man's intelligence to create that which is greater than himself, like that moment that happened in the year 2035, let's say. Like, this is really interesting. Like, one of the ways that humanity was poking around its first tendrils into something really interesting. And at the same time, like, it was doing things that were fundamentally childish and kind of speak to the underlying clever playfulness of humanity. Like, there's something I think you can get at a pretty interesting mode of consciousness by looking at this frog doing a kickflip. Like, I do. Like, I actually think that that's a really genuinely, like, there is information in it. Like, it contains information, and
Mm-hmm.
via its containing of information, there is sort of a mode that considers that state of information, that working state of mind, when you render that information as itself valuable and interesting and enriching in some sense. So for that reason, I would say that even AI art, could be valuable. Like, for example, and then I'll end here. But that one particular counterfeiter, like, he was a really, like, the one I'm thinking of. Like, I can't remember his name, I'm afraid, but apparently he could counterfeit Monet's. He could counterfeit like Van Gogh's. Like, he was like a ridiculously good counterfeiter. And like, there's actually a sub collection of people that are interested in this guy, this counterfeiter, and collect this counterfeiter's art because they find that mode of consciousness, this guy, this peculiar counterfeiter guy, to be itself interesting. And for that reason, these pieces of art go from priceless to worthless to whatever state or however much someone's willing to pay for this counterfeiter's art instead. Like, it depends on the perceiver, and it really.
Sure. So here's some stuff. Most recently, Steph said that perhaps the problem is believing that just because somebody had a thought first, it belongs to them. And brings up science is usually in the attitude that discoveries belong in science, at least in the long run, to the species as a whole. He says maybe art needs to be this way too, but of course, art has been monetized into the dirt. And there's something to be said about that. Like, it's like and maybe that's an attitude that's more approachable now, as the advent of art created by machines is a thing, perhaps. But I really want to mention what you said earlier, Stefan. There's a couple messages. I tend to think that it's not the age or way it was recorded. It's about being with people. Each form of entertainment is more and more individualized, but here soon we may see a path back to that in digital landscapes. So basically, this idea that, or probably a premier example of this is the movie theater. The slow dying decline of the movie theater, at least in places that are less populated, perhaps. COVID had a lot to do with that as well. But point being, like, you used to go somewhere more often to see a movie and be amongst other people. And there was, of course, it's a process. It's a social interaction. There's a lot more to it than just the instant gratification of, I want to see The Exorcist. Bam, there it is on my little device, or projected on my wall, or on my computer, my television at home. And then suddenly you individualize it by doing that. You remove the social aspect. This is incredibly abundant today. I mean, with streaming services, you can watch almost anything at home except when you can't, and then you get pissed off and become a physical media junkie like me. But the point being is that what Stefan's trying to say is we've removed a lot of the social aspect and the being amongst other people to enjoy art. I am one of those people that is very much on board with that train of thought. Like, I mean, my degrees are in theater, and in order to do theater, really, you have to be among other people and you have to directly interact with them. It's another reason that I really enjoy Dungeons and Dragons. I just had a session last weekend for the first time in over a month, and it was phenomenal because I got everybody there and we sat around a table and we did collective storytelling, and it was so much fun. And I would not, at least I can say, would not have had anywhere near a comparable experience had it just been myself and nothing else, or for lack of a better phrase, myself at the table playing with whatever, what that would look like. Stefan has sent a wonderful one-liner that AI art requires less than one person. I guess in the sense of, besides providing a prompt, but I mean, if you could theoretically kick over the first domino, you could perhaps, until the power gets shut off, just have AI prompting themselves. But yeah, I don't know. And this is maybe part of the last conversation that we had about, not to dig into the AI art thing too much again, but the idea that art really requires a human touch to be art, or at least in the way we traditionally view it. I don't know. Let's see. Maybe there's something to pick on as far as obsolescence goes in this way.
I think what we're
Go
kind
ahead,
of
Trevor.
doing, yeah, I think what one of the things that we've done here is we've kind of detached ourselves and revealed for ourselves, the three of us, that it's not one. Things really do become quite relative. Like this notion of like even science, and I'm a scientist. I do science every day. Like it's just what I that's yeah. So that's important to me. But I want to note that even science is a mode of consciousness. Like it's getting at something, but it's a mode of consciousness, and the same is true for everything
Will you
else.
elaborate on mode of consciousness for me?
So by mode of consciousness, I mean a certain qualitative state of mind. So, for example, Bray, like, I want you to kind of. How strange is that one movie, like the original cartoon of Alice in Wonderland? You do feel like you're falling into some strange, interesting place. It's this qualitative state that is, in fact, separate and unique and different from your normal state of consciousness, your normal state of mind, perhaps. And for somewhat undefinable reasons, like there's a lot of nuance that underlies it. There's another qualitative state that underlies David Lynch movies. There's something across like 7, I don't know how many David Lynch movies there are, but from Dune to Blue Velvet to all the others, there's like a underlying like tether between them that kind of gets at this one state of consciousness, this one state of mind. And the same is true for like a Buddhist mode of consciousness. Like that state of looking at reality in that way is interesting and unique. And that's unique from like going and watching the first Iron Man movie back in 2008 or whatever year it was, and walking out going, I'm going to be a scientist. I'm going to invent a rocket suit. I'm going to take over the world. That was me
after I watched Oppenheimer and went to Half Price Books and bought like 3 books on physics.
Yeah. I mean, that was a lot of people. When the Queen's Gambit TV show on Netflix came out, they're over. Yeah, nice. But when that Queen's Gambit show came out, like there was this huge spike in people playing chess, like an unbelievably huge amount of chessboards were bought in the months after that show detonated, like and got everywhere, like everyone fell in love with it. So that's what when I say mode of consciousness, that's specifically what I refer to, like different, qualitatively different states of mind that you can kind of walk in and go, "Ooh, this is different." It's as if you can say that there is something qualitatively different between your current state of consciousness, the person I'm speaking to right now, Bray, and the way that reality is when you take a I don't know, like a fairly large amount of like psilocybin mushrooms. Like you could say that there is a qualitative difference between right now and that state of mind. For any listeners that know what that's like, maybe that's a helpful analogy. Then you can say that there are different qualitative differences between these things. Uh, there's a qualitative difference between these two states of mind. What I mean to say is that the same is true for all of these different states of mind within without the need to elicit it via psychedelic, psychotropic drugs. Alice in Wonderland is really quite interesting and unique from Iron Man. Is really quite different and unique to the way that you perceive yourself and exist.
Then you drop acid and watch it.
Well, I was going to say sure, but also Metal, the Pink Floyd album Metal, which is also really quite different to the way that you perceive yourself and the way that you perceive reality when in the room with your father. Like that is itself its own mode of consciousness. Do you see how different you are in front of your like spouse compared to in front of your father? Like and compare both of those to the way you are in front of both of them at the same time.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I was thinking, I was connecting what you're saying with a quick message I sent in the Discord. I think under the topic ideas. I don't know why the other day I was just having a bunch of ideas about stuff to talk about, but this concept of modes of consciousness, like why would I go and buy books on physics after watching Oppenheimer? Why did people go out and suddenly be fascinated with chess after watching The Queen's Gambit, or any number of things? This is a phenomenon that has like been so close to, I don't know, my heart since I was a kid, and would go watch movies and then suddenly come out and like, oh my god, like, you know, it's like I go watch some
almost
movie,
certainly
like
ADHD.
Yeah, superhero movie, and you're like, I could do that. Like, yeah,
well,
I
that's
could do
just
that. But
sure.
What I mean to do is tie that to identity, and like this sort of engagement with entertainment and identity. And it's the same thing with why. Oh my, I could talk about this for so long, but what I mean to say is it's just an identity thing. Like, is what we're doing is like you are taking part of this form of entertainment. If it's just taking that as the example. Speaking of art, it's apparently Raphael's birthday according to my Windows little thing. So lovely. Anyways, you're taking part of this medium and this art piece, and it becomes part of you. And it's the same thing with maybe like me going to get the mail. It's like that's been a part of me for so long. To lose it, like I said early in the episode, would feel like part of me is gone. And what I think is important about this sense of identity, and like kind of how you were saying about being different people in front of others, depending on who they are, is the question that I sent in the Discord was like, how much of life is actually performance? And that is a question that originally sprung from the idea of gender and Judith Butler's concept of gender as performance. But I'm talking, aside from gender presentation, I mean like how much of life is a performance in the sense of valuing obsolescence and doing things like that. Like I used to sometimes on campus I would bring my Walkman and wear my little like wired headphones and have my Walkman on my hip playing like Guns N' Roses Appetite for Destruction or something. There's something to be said about what that does for me personally, but it's like, is that a performance? Am I, even if I don't mean, like, do you get what I'm saying?
I see where you're going, and I have to say, like, that question, is everything a performance, is a very theater major thing to say. It speaks to your own identity, I think. So here's what I'll say about like the thrust of what you just said, having to do with identity and then eventually performance. I think identity is one way, one word you could use to describe like that, the paintbrush you're using for bringing everything back to this notion of identity and like modes of consciousness. The way I would look at it, I think everything is like that. You could use that word if you want, but I think that applies to literally everything, like quite literally everything. Everything is a mode of consciousness. And you're like, well, why do people like doing Alice in Wonderland? Why is that
right?
Sort of in it? Why is that something that's interesting to encounter? Well, all I can say is like that state of reality, Alice in Wonderland, and like the peculiarities of it aside, that is everything. Like, no, like that is the way that everything is. That is our conversation right now. Like, why do you enjoy this state of mind right now, talking about some weird metaphysical concept that here now you can. This applies to everything, including science, including the collection of money, including Marxism or capitalism, or including telling silly jokes at the bar, including being in the presence of your father, if that's something that you enjoy, so on, so on, so on, so on, so on. I think right now we're talking about modes of consciousness, and you can ascribe to it like, well, this is my identity, like this is the way I get at things. But it's also, I just got a ring on my door.
I know. I heard that. I was like, am I losing my mind? Do you need to go check that?
I'll come back later. I think I know who it is, and
Okay.
I'll get to it later. Someone else, please.
Ringing the doorbell. Obsolete or no? I mean, I guess if you don't know the person that lives there, it's a valid reason. But typically, it's like like nowadays, if I go to somebody's house, usually I like text them or call them because I can do that, and I don't have to knock on the door and be like an unknown until they open the door. Anyway, it's funny that you were saying all that because Steph said, why are some modes of consciousness massively preferred over others? You know, this idea of everything is a mode of consciousness. It's like, and why do we all gravitate toward, why are some things popular? And he says, because we have similar experiences and aren't as individual as we like to believe, probably. So maybe like the concept of Monet being a very popular artist is because maybe in large part people find similar experience through the art. And there's probably at least a sizable chunk that are like, oh, everybody else thinks Monet is good, so he must be good. I'm gonna go vote for Trump. No,
but another thing that I was trying to get at too is that, it could be the case that, we think that Monet is a gorgeous artist for one reason or another because we're able to get to his frame of mind, to his similar experience, because he was an effective artist.
Right. So is that part of, is being a good artist being somebody who's capable of putting people who consume your art, I hate that word, or experience your art in the same mindset, or maybe as close to the same mindset. I mean, it's just like David Lynch. It's like David Lynch doesn't want you to watch his movie on the fucking cell phone, or Christopher Nolan doesn't want you to go see one of his movies on a portable television or something like that. It's like, this is not what I intend. So don't, what was the marketing for the Beats by Dre headphones back in the day? Oh my god, I was a teenager. What am I talking about? It was like, you're not hearing all the music. You need to hear the music like the producers hear the music. You need to hear the art the way that it's been intended to be heard. So buy my Beats by Dre headphones or whatever.
And then here's this really, really overpriced, piece of shit. I mean, it's the truth.
I'm back.
Yeah. And then it becomes a cultural icon that if you don't have the Beats headphones, then you're listening to those lame ass JBL or something else. Like, you're just not with the times. Yeah, you're just poor. And then we have class economics influencing the cultural. It's all just connected. Everything's a mode of consciousness. Just make sure yours isn't being a broke bitch, and you'll be fine.
That's funny.
That's the moral lesson of our socioeconomic landscape in the 21st century. But this made me giggle too, because Steph said you were getting pretty close to Platonism, Trevor.
Well, the issue with that is, like, Platonism is this notion that there's something that's underneath these things. Like, there's something like actually tangible about Alice in Wonderland. Like without us there's like a tangible state of consciousness called Alice in Wonderland. And I can't speak to the authenticity of that truly. But it seems to me that it does in fact require a mind state for these things to exist. It needs you. requires you. Like Bray, it needs like you to be there in order to state this state of consciousness. And furthermore, I'm not certain. I'm not sure how you could call one state of consciousness out there in Alice in Wonderland mode of consciousness to be interesting and separate from or distinct between from many individuals. Like I do think, or at the very least, my intuition is your state of consciousness for experiencing Alice in Wonderland is different from my own. There's like a different color and hue and texture to it. I do think, insofar as like I think you can relatively move towards someone else's like state in some strange way, such as like, for example, like me lighting my body on fire and like jumping up and down is further away from your state of consciousness than closer. And I think for that reason, like whatever state that you're presently in, I think for that reason, then you can in fact move in directionally towards your state of consciousness, Bray. I can do that. I can't ever know like if I'm getting closer or further beyond like the vaguest of notions. But you'll never actually be able to close in and like target and truly encounter someone else's state of affairs. Not like a 1-to-1, not like perfect, like an R squared of 1 in like a linear regression, like a sciencey, like, you know, seeing like, okay, these two things have perfect parity. Like I can never know that. And I can never truly encounter this thing in the same way as you. So I wouldn't call myself a Platonist because I don't think that there's like a true authenticity to any of these things. It really does behave with the perceiver. It is the perceiver. All of this is the perceiver. Like Bray, like your Trevor is different from Stefan's Trevor. It's different from the listener's Trevor. The way that you encounter me, and by me I mean another aspect of your own self. You'll never see like my reality. You'll never see me for who I am. You can only encounter yourself. Kind of like layers of steel or layers and layers of someone in the state of fault
Ogres
or something.
Ogres have layers.
Great, yeah. He's right. He's absolutely
right. I think this is what fascinates me so much about art overall, is that, you know, it's like you say all the time, Trevor, it's everybody's wearing a bed sheet, so we can never actually like touch or see who somebody really is, just because of the way that sort of the world is put together. But we create things to represent what that's like, and that somehow helps us have a better understanding of each other, or at least in the world that we live in and the experiences that we have while doing that. And somehow it's almost like making 2 + 2 = 5, if that makes any sense. It's like, you know, I can't directly connect with another human being in the way that I'd like, but I can try to encapsulate my experience in the world and my experience with others in this sort of struggle or this battle with life, if you want to join me in calling it that, maybe. And I can create something to represent any number of things. But it's like, after I've done that and somebody else has experienced it, it's like that has brought me closer to other people. I'm thinking about like what Stefan said about sort of the individuality versus the, you know, collection of things. Like it does feel better that I can go to a movie theater and sit with other people and watch a movie, as opposed to just experiencing it on my own. I've mentioned before, like the phenomenon of like reaction videos, like the satisfaction that somebody can get out of watching somebody else watch something that you've already seen, and to just like know, like, oh my god, when Thor fucking bifrosts into Wakanda and kicks all of the bad dudes' asses and goes to cut Thanos' head off or whatever, that shit's badass. Is it actually badass? Let's watch 20 people on YouTube watch the movie and just skip to that point so I can see other people go, oh my god, you know.
So, like this is the only, I just don't want to hesitate on this, right? but I think it's because we're so chronically alone, you know, like, so you were talking about doing rituals and whatnot earlier. And it's like, because of the world that we live in, the, the mode of consciousness to unite, what Trevor was talking about, that is me exists in only one exact place. And like, as we get older and wiser, we end up understanding that a lot better. And so, like I say, we're all chronically alone. So we end up carving out a lot of time for ourselves to be in the same path, to unite our path with somebody for a while, to develop a similar experience. I mean, like, we know that we're alone and we're obsessed with not being alone.
Right.
And it's awful sometimes, a lot of times.
Yeah, I mean, I had the immense pleasure of getting to watch those last, dozen or so, maybe a little bit less than a dozen Marvel movies that ended up in the culmination of Infinity War and Endgame, with a group of guys that I ended up just sitting next to at the movie theater on accident a couple of times. And then it became a thing where, like, well, we're going to make sure we all sit on the same row every time for each one of these movies. And then, of course, you finally get to watch this pair of, movies that finish out the decade of films. And you're sitting there and you're yelling and you're screaming, you're laughing, you're crying, and it's fantastic. And I would not trade that for anything. And of course, the closest thing I can get to living that again is watching other people see it for the first time online. If I could go pick up a group of 20 people and make them watch all 10 years of the movies and then go rent out a movie theater, I would do it. But I can't. It's not very practical.
Sure.
It's like the Jeffrey Dahmer is like, we're just sit there. We're just gonna watch some movies and we're gonna have a good time.
I was thinking about the Clockwork Orange,
Yeah, just sit there.
I think living vicariously through others is just part of just one of the ways we encounter reality. I think, speaking about loneliness, one thing that I think about with all of this is that I think we're primarily social animals. Like, we encounter reality socially. We want others to be there. And if I know it's like I heard it, if I understand correctly, it is currently a crime in France, I believe, to only own one guinea pig, because you need to have at least two, because guinea pigs are social animals, and that would be very unkind to guinea pigs to only have one, because it would do social and psychological harm to the guinea pig. And I think
that's incredible.
Yeah, I do believe it's. By the way, I had a guinea pig growing up, completely alone by itself in a single cage. Sometimes
straight to jail.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I didn't know. Yeah, but either way, I do believe humans are social animals, and what's strange about that is when you attend to your need to have a social attachment, when you attend to that state of your being, it seems to you that you are a hopeless, lonely person, a loathsome, lonely person that is perfectly alone and has no one to talk to and no one to be close to and all that. But that's, generally speaking, just the mode of consciousness of someone seeking a social bond or a social connection. I don't know if it necessarily says something about you individually. You could have quite a lot of friends relative to others, but if you feel lonely, then you are quite loathsome. And like, that is who you are as a person. That is your mode of consciousness. Like, that's just the way that you see things. It's not necessarily the issue with all this is, I can't say if it's true or false. It really does depend on the perceiver at that point. Like the thing that we're discussing right now. Like, it's not something I can measure and go, yep, you're alone. You're lonely. You're alone. Yep, there you go. I mean, unless like you live like on the top of a mountain and you're perfectly, totally alone. But even it's complicated, and to me it depends really squarely on what it is you want. And if you don't attend to that state of consciousness, you could be quite fine living on a mountaintop, speaking with the birds and with the leaves, and being some sort of strange saintly figure. You can do that, and you don't really feel lonely. It's just the way that you attend to reality. And I don't mean to say like relativize everything in a negative context, because like you can't really control Well, maybe you can, but I, in my experience, have difficulty controlling the feeling of loneliness. Like I can't turn it off. I can't just click a switch and then I no longer feel lonely. I think that kind of runs against the whole point of feeling lonely. Like the whole point is it's a negative emotion that you're going to have to hit at the root. And to hit it at the root, you're going to have to go make friends. Like it's like an underlying thing.
So what you're telling me is that I go and I spend $50 on a newly pressed vinyl record, bring it home and listen to it, as opposed to whooping out my student Spotify subscription that I've had despite the fact that I've been out of graduate school for 2 years. And I do that to reconnect with a part of myself, that was sprouted from the ground whenever I was a child. That has been slowly stripped away from me. That was pretty much already stripped away by the time I was born, actually. I mean, 97, I mean, the vinyl records were on the way out. My point being that, I'm doing this to reconnect with myself because I'm lonely.
No. That kind of...
No,
I disagree.
I'm being facetious.
You are being facetious, but I do think it's interesting because...
Trevor said, no, you're not alone.
No, it's not. I mean to say...
You've got family.
Well, like, why do I do this? Why do I do, like, this thing? Like, that's basically what you asked. Like, why did I do this?
Right.
Well, that's relative. Like, your question relies on the notion that you should have been doing something else. What else were you supposed to be doing?
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously no need to, for me to psychoanalyze my entire situation, but... No, I'm just meant to sort of,
sure.
Like I said, facetiously encapsulate the episode. And, we talked about starting with like obsolescence and, we get, it's clear that there seems to be some value in obsolescence for certain people. And so it's more of like, what exactly is that obsolescence? And we've talked about a lot of stuff. It's like, well, maybe it's part of, we have a love for the process of doing something, this sort of ritual thing that's nothing new in human behavior, the idea of a ritual. And then we also talked about things like identity, authenticity, just the sheer substance of entertainment. And now we're talking about sort of the human collective and how we relate to one another. All of this through just the engagement with more or less obsolete material. So I don't know. I think it's just fascinating the way that technology or just things in general can command so much in the world. There's clearly something materially to be measured about it, whether even if it's not substantial in the way that we want. I mean, things like physical media have had a resurgence, just like the vinyl records, for example. I mean, you can find them all over the place now, and people are there, and people are buying them and using them and listening to them, and so clearly we do find a value there. I don't know that every person that's out picking up the new Sabrina Carpenter or whatever vinyl is thinking about the larger socio-political sphere, but it is really neat to sort of reflect on that. So I don't know, do you guys have any closing remarks? I don't want to keep us too long.
Well, you can pretty much just close it with that, really. Obsolescence relies on the notion that there's something better than what it is you should be doing. And for the life of me, I can't find one, so I don't really know if that exists.
That's a good way of putting it. It's like all you mean is it's like one of my favorite quotes is like alcoholic is just a word that you use to describe somebody who drinks more than you that you don't like. Or something. It's like, well, obsolete's just a word that you use to describe something that does the job faster but not as cool, or that or I don't
know. It relies everything relies on the perceiver. All of these, you would be surprised how many things that you're saying rely on some sort of notion that you're not getting at right now. And if you take the moment to sort of sit and rest with it in yourself, you might become a little bit more wise and question why it is that you're doing something in the first place.
Hell yeah.
I guess we could...
maybe one day this podcast will be obsolete. And there'll be like one kid in his basement somewhere who's got like all of them downloaded onto his brain or something. And he just goes back and he's like, gonna listen to the We Mortal Coils podcast. And they're all like, ha, nerd, you don't just immediately sync up with the quantum state of I don't know. Anyways, thank you all for joining us on this episode, and we will see you in the next one. Take care of one another.